welcome to Alpha Book Club. I'm Rachel Heine, and with me, as always, is Geek and Sundry's Hector Navarro.
Hi.
And Geek Bomb's Maude Garrett. And joining us today is the Inkshares contest winner, author of the novel The Punch Escrow, Tal Klein.
Chin,
Welcome.
Yay.
What am I looking?
Yes, welcome. Yes.
Cheers.
Welcome,
cheers,
Tal.
cheers,
Hi.
cheers.
Welcome.
So we're going to talk about that book later on in the show, but before we get started, can you give us a brief synopsis to tease it out for
Yeah,
the
it's
audience?
just like To Kill a Mockingbird.
Tal.
No, it's yes, classic Tal. No, it's a science fiction story set in 2147 about
Good year.
Yes,
Nice
a great
drop.
year. It's the vintage of this wine. Yeah, and it's about a man who's inadvertently been duplicated through a teleportation accident, and so now he has to outrun a corporation that owns teleportation that's out to sort of correct the error, while also trying to regain the love of his wife. So it's kind of a bizarre love triangle with two versions of the same guy and a wife.
Hey, there you are.
And there I am.
You
And,
wrote a book. That's
cool.
so cool.
That is so
That's
cool.
like the coolest thing you can do, really.
I want to get a shirt that says I wrote a book.
Yeah,
Yes.
Right.
You should.
I'm going to get one.
That's a feat in itself. How long does it
Awesome.
take you to write a book from where to go?
Oof. The research part actually took longer than writing because it's a hard science fiction novel. So like everything in there is based in real science. So it's a lot of the research took most of the time. Writing was about 2 years.
Wow.
It's crazy. Yeah.
What kind of research do you have to do with this stuff? Because, I mean, what kind of line can you cross when it comes to making it up and it being actual science?
There's no steadfast rules, but you know what I wanted to do. You know, I'm a big advocate of STEM. So what I wanted to do is build all the technologies in my version of the near future from things that exist today that are on the precipice of science fiction. You know, like I don't know if anybody saw recently, we just teleported a photon.
Yes.
Into orbit.
Yeah.
That just happened. That just happened.
Yeah.
And so, we already have the early onset of nanotechnology, genetic editing.
What I
CRISPR,
love is I haven't had a chance to read the book yet, but what I love is the last time we talked, Tal, you mentioned like the global warming sort of fix, like the research / you went and talked to people that were experts in that field.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So, I mean, in that particular scenario, one of the things that was very important for me is that the future not be dystopian. Like I didn't want it to be like this terrible place where people didn't want to live, but I also didn't want it to become like this magical utopia that, just seems unrealistic. So the tendency that humanity has for solving problems is with Band-Aids. We're not very good at very good at like permanent solutions, but we put lots of Band-Aids on things. So I said, how do we solve for global warming in a way that's not very elegant? And that's kind of how I proposed that problem to a bunch of science geeks. And they came up with this notion of modifying mosquitoes to eat carbon fumes and exhale air, and a side effect of that would be that they would excrete water, so it's always raining in the future as a result of our solution for
biomanipulation.
Yeah, totally.
So
I think that's so cool.
So it's kind of like it's cool because they solve the problem, but it's kind of crappy because it's always raining.
Yeah, that's a good Band-Aid.
You're literally getting pissed off.
And then that kind of
Exactly.
explains the future of Blade Runner, I feel like. You also explained that.
Yeah.
You made that make sense. That's why it's always raining in Blade Runner. Because of Tal's mosquitoes.
That's right.
That's it.
Yeah. That's
Awesome.
great.
Mosquitoes.
Well, we're going to get into that
Cool.
way more at the end of this because
Can't
we have
wait.
to know all about everything.
I mean, I got a flight coming up in August that I've already decided. I'm like, cool, I'm going to knock out the Punch Escrow on my flight.
I'm stoked
I can't wait
because
to do
it's
it.
coming out on the 25th, and we're giving away a ton of these books at the
next week.
Carnival. Right?
Yeah, Comic-Con.
That's it. I've been trying to figure out how to pronounce that.
Sounds like
Carnival.
you're saying it right as an Australian.
Carnival.
Carnival, yes.
It's Carnival.
Carnival.
Carnival. Yeah.
Because it seems like you're being.
Some people say Carnival, and when they say it, I'm like, no. But I don't know what's I call it Carnival. So.
And
that's
for a
what
while,
think
I
it
was
is.
telling people it was a convival, like a revival. It's like,
Survival.
get the religion. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's coming out on the 25th, and we're giving away a ton of copies. So hopefully people come to the Geek and Sundry Carnival, and we'll get themselves a shirt.
Honestly,
and a book.
carnival sounds like
can't
you're
say
saying
it.
carnival as an Australian.
Carnival.
If I say carnival.
Yeah. That's
Yeah, you're
what-
saying
No, but
that.
I'm saying actual carnival.
No, but you're
So
saying
she's saying with an R,
but
she
it's,
doesn't.
that's
An
why
R
it
doesn't
works.
exist in her.
See, we named
That's
it.
true.
We
Doesn't
named it
exist.
Everyone wins.
correctly.
smothered
Say it like
that
a
R.
pirate.
We have
Carnival.
Carnival or carnival?
No, carnival. Because then you
Carnival.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
T-Boys unfortunately can't make it to Comic-Con or Carnival, but don't worry, we have a bunch of stuff for you guys. Welcome to our Alpha community, you guys. It's great to be back. I'm sorry that I missed last week.
I'll get to all the questions. There's a bunch of questions about the book, too.
Great,
So we'll
yeah.
get to that later. We'll do that later.
Absolutely.
You want to log any away?
Yeah, if
Awesome.
you guys have any questions, throw them into the chat. Thank you guys for joining us. We are reading To Kill a Mockingbird this week. Hopefully you guys have gotten to that first part. So I am super curious, because I was out of town last week, a couple of things. One, have you guys read this before? And two,
No.
how did last week go? Because it's
Hey, chat. How about you? You tell Rachel how it went last week.
because I got tagged in some tweets and I was like, ooh, I can't wait to hear what happened.
My first impressions, I have never read To Kill a Mockingbird, and I saw the film only for the first time like a few months ago.
That
It's my
surprises
my
me.
good friend and roommate's favorite book of all time and one of his
Really?
favorite
Don't say
films.
his name.
Yeah, Keller is his name.
Oh.
And that makes Maude laugh because she thinks it's a silly name.
No,
That's
last
gonna
name.
hurt his feelings so much. Oh, his last name? Knobloch? Yeah, that's his last name.
No,
Yeah, Knobloch. Yeah. Yeah, it's great. That's what it is. So Maud's gonna be laughing at that for the next hour. But it's his favorite book of all time, and he's really well read. And I've been hitting him up with reading suggestions while also doing the show. I'm not that much of a reader, Tal, until I started doing the show, and I'm trying to get more
But
into.
you're a drinker.
I'm a drinker,
Right, yeah.
He's a comic book
That's right.
fan.
Yeah.
and I'm a comic book
and a
man.
film buff, so we have
True, true,
actually
true.
read a bunch of. Most of the books are either
Yeah, this was
have
my.
been film adaptations,
There's
an
or,
adaptation. Well,
or
there's an
will
adaptation
be,
of
or
Kill a
TV,
Mockingbird.
Yes.
American Gods too.
I think it's a fantastic adaptation. The film
Yeah.
to the book, from what I read so far, and
Yeah.
it's just a classic movie. And I don't know, Maud, did you get a chance to see it in the last week?
Apparently it's on Netflix, but I decided to buy it on YouTube
Okay, great.
for $3.
Great.
So no, I still haven't.
Okay,
I got
cool.
too consumed with reading it than
Sure.
watching it.
But having Gregory Peck and his Atticus Finch
Right.
in your head is so
Yes.
helpful
Yes.
when reading the actual source
I
material.
agree.
So my first impression is I think this is an incredibly well written book. I think it's
Incredibly,
fine.
yeah.
I have issues and frustrations with bigger picture stuff. I know that this is high school curriculum,
Yeah.
and in that thing, Maud and I had a conversation last week that was really let's get into that. And I was frustrated because I think my frustration, and I was talking to my roommate about this, is I worry that there isn't going to be enough historical context given in these classes when they go over the book. Do you know what I'm saying? But that's not up to the text itself. That has nothing to do with the text. That's just to
so
ensure
a teacher
that
should be like, we don't use that word anymore.
It's just-
This is why.
Oh, right.
You know what I mean?
It's like
Yeah.
read chapter 32, and they're like, okay.
I was thinking to myself, if I had a kid who was black, half black, and they were and even just having if I had a kid who was a Latino kid, whatever, just anytime I would read that word, it cuts. It cuts. And it gets to a point within the text itself that it becomes commonplace, and because it's a different time and it was even published in a different time, and all of these things that is historical context, and like Maud said, there's a new normal now, and there's all this different
I
things
think
that
the
go
cutting
on.
is intentional.
The cutting is intentional, but for me, I know that I'm being cut because what that word means for me, but for characters in the story itself, it's
Right.
different. It doesn't mean that.
Right, 'cause in the version- yeah, and-
because these characters don't know what we know, and it's a completely different thing. So my frustration in having this sort of bigger picture conversation about using this as a mandatory reading in high school is how much of that context is gone over in high school curriculum in an English class of okay, here's the history of race in America. Here's all of this because it was
depends on
even
the class.
it depends on the
the
class.
school,
It depends on
where
the
it is.
teacher. It depends on
Absolutely,
all of that
because
stuff.
And I think I was saying there's absolutely no way that my teacher was going to give us, 14-hour lessons breaking down the American history.
In high school in Australia,
And the
absolutely.
word in itself was never really acknowledged. It's maybe they don't say that anymore.
Sure.
Anyway, move on. And that's the
Sure.
conversation on it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I feel like we tend to sweep a lot of that stuff under the carpet in general. Whenever it comes to uncomfortable things in American history,
Yeah.
and I think that's unfortunate. I think the cutting is necessary. You're absolutely right. A curriculum needs to be part of explaining the book and what you should get out of it.
Sure.
But it's important, I think, to realize that one of the unique characteristics of this story is that as she's as Scout is coming into her own, and we're starting to understand how she's conflicted, but also because she's getting a lot of this reinforcement both at home and at school, about segregation. And, you know, she goes to the church, you know, and she's not really welcome at the church. And there's like reverse racism, you know, in that, you know, in the church where the blacks don't want the whites there. And then there's the court scene, you know, and there's a whole bunch of scenes where like the Reverend invites her to sit in the colored section of the court. And I think that's a really important perspective on American history. Yeah. It's uncomfortable. Yeah. And it needs to be part of an education curriculum. You can't assume that a high school student is just going to manifest that and digest it themselves.
And I'm so torn because the other half of me is like, well, of course this book should never have been banned. Of course not. Because of everything you're saying, because we can't forget the past, because we need to go over this kind of stuff, the stuff that makes us uncomfortable, the stuff that makes us question what our value system is as a nation and as a people and all that other stuff. And I think that we also talked about, I was trying to relate it to a film criticism that I read a few months ago about this movie, a Martin Scorsese movie called Silence. And this film reviewer was saying there's two approaches. The first approach in art or in a novel, in a movie, whatever, is for the storyteller to take a specific stance and an opinion and a perspective and go, this is my opinion, and I'm going to tell you what it is. And you know, and just from right off the bat, be like, this is wrong and this is why, and now you're either on my side or you're not, and this is the story. The other approach is not to be so upfront with what that might be, and have a more sort of vague, if there's two sides to a story. This Martin Scorsese film Silence featured priests that were in Japan, and apparently in the beginning of the movie it doesn't say which group is correct one way or the other. It just kind of presents the case, I guess, as it were. And the film critic was arguing that like what the movie does is that second approach of essentially trying to get you to get on this person's side who you would normally think would be wrong from what we might believe today, to get to get you as the audience on their side, and then at the end of the story, it's almost like fooling you, tricking you into being like, well, here's the thing about your belief system. Maybe it's flawed. Maybe it hurts people. Maybe it's oppressive. Maybe it's whatever. So with those two different approaches, I think To Kill a Mockingbird is definitely the second one, because Adult Scout, who is the narrator, talking about her life as a child, Adult Scout, throughout the text, there'll be a point where she'd be like, stop, let me tell you about this family in our town, and would explain things thoroughly and then go right back into a story. But at no point does Adult Scout go, cool, so it's definitely wrong to say the N-word all the time. Like, it's definitely, like, she doesn't do that because
don't say it, period.
Because the point of the story is, I think, to sort of get people who were reading it to go to think, yeah, Atticus is defending a guilty man just because he's black. He's absolutely guilty. And then throughout the course of the story, go, wait a minute. And I think that's what Harper Lee, I think that's what she's doing.
Totally. Does Harper Lee actually know that at 1960 in Alabama?
Well, that's what I think. I think that, yes, I think she's trying to, because in the context and the time period, when we're reading it, we know, of course this is wrong. Of course, you know, you should
7 years later.
But when you are someone who grew up in a town much like this, or, you know, I don't know if you guys talked about the history, but there was a similar sort of case when she was a kid as well, and her father was a lawyer, and all of these things that she witnessed.
A lot of it I feel like is drawn from her life.
And so I think when you have a time period that does not see the things that we see today and has not had years of discourse, and hopefully some teachers who are providing that kind of context and people having that conversation, it feels like her way of getting in there into the normal, what the day-to-day life and perspective was, and then flipping it on its head. So you as the reader are like a child, you are like this child in that you haven't realized that yet, and you're realizing it with her, like, hey, this is wrong. That's sort of what it feels like. And so it comes off when you know that it's taught in school, and you know that this is a moral lesson for her. This book is teaching her how to think and feel, and her dad is giving her that in different ways, and other characters are as well. And so it feels a little bit like that's the intent of this book for that time period.
I also think that her father's treatment of her as a female is really, really interesting, compared to how everyone is trying to get her to act more like a southern lady. And that really jumped out to me. You know, now that I'm older, you know, like I said, I read it in high school. Now that I'm older, I've got 2 daughters. You know, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, of how I raised them, and I'm like, I can't imagine them going to school and being, you know, taught to act more ladylike or like, not learn as much or not try to be smart.
It kind of seems
tough.
It kind of seems normal to us now in today's day and age. But I imagine that when this book was published at Atticus Finch, people were probably like, "You're raising her like a boy." Like it was so controversial just because he treated her with respect and didn't mind, not wearing a dress every single day and all these different things. It's not a big deal. But I'm sure people when they read it,
it's something that did not even occur to me when I read it in high school. I guess the feminist aspect of the book. I got so involved in the civil rights aspect of it, and now as reading it, as a father and kind of, as an older guy, there's so much in there, and I think Harper is definitely getting out a lot of her angst from, and even current, whenever she wrote it, into the state of being brought up as a woman,
And I think much like things have changed, but they haven't, and they've changed in different ways for the civil rights movement. It's you can still go to places in this country and have people have similar ideas about how women should act and behave and speak. And so it's one of those things that even though we've come a long way, there's still when I was reading all of that, I was getting so angry because I feel like I've heard stuff like that on both sides for women and for people of color still to this day, where you're just like, I just don't. Makes you feel naive a little bit. You're like, I just don't understand what's wrong.
But I think it speaks to the depth of the book. It's got so many, the dimensions of the book. Racism, gender, even American justice, just general justice. That the guy, that's in court, and you know that he's a bad person, and you know that what happened didn't happen, and you're just watching 12 jurors, declare this man guilty, and
I love the part where, because at the end of our section that we read for this week, end of the second section out of 3 sections.
Oh, sorry.
Were that
is that a spoiler?
No, that's fine. That's fine. I've seen the film. It's fine.
Oh, that's right.
But
you acted real calm then.
But I love the section where I think a part that sums up a lot of that was when the in the courtroom that the lawyer gets the defendant to say, you felt sorry for her.
That was and
it was what a great line.
I want to break down the way that line is written, because it stuck with me all afternoon.
It was
I have to say it twice, but the first time it was, you feel sorry for her,
like italicized,
and then the next one straight after, you felt sorry for her, and it's the way that was. It says 2 completely different things, but very, very much the same powerful statement. And I love that it needed to be said twice to figure out the same sentence, but to figure out the breaking it apart, really what is happening here. And I love that line. I got real distracted for the last 10 minutes, guys, because chat is going off at the moment. People talking about how basically ignoring the problem seems to be the easiest solution in this day and age, but everyone kind of weighing in on how racism has affected their life, their city, their country, how they grew up, this current day and age. Chaotic Cthulhu actually said that he grew up in a town where there was doorways, one painted black, one painted white. So you knew how to enter the building is what I was gathering from that, but the doorways were differently painted.
That's incredible.
And then in England, obviously, we had another guy, sorry I've just lost your name because chat's going so fast. You're saying that England obviously has a huge undercurrent of racism that has constantly been there, never acknowledged, barely spoken about, but obviously with the new wave terror attacks that are happening in England, it's finally starting to really rear its ugly head. So it's always there, it just kind of takes events or takes major things to actually get people to be like, great, I'm racist. Or, oh, great, I can understand what's happening, but still have a perspective on this that isn't hurtful. I think that this actually still, even though it was so long ago, is applicable to everyone in every situation and scenario.
And going back to that moment that you felt sorry for her, I think that so perfectly encapsulates so many of those issues we're talking about earlier, Tal, the ones that are still relevant today, and especially how racism is sort of treated in the United States and probably around the world, that because of the systems of power, how they're set up, that even if you're a very, very, very poor white person, it's still
the bottom of
living
the
they lived outside the dump, right?
They're living in a dump.
Physical cooties running around in their hair.
Yeah, it was dirty, right? They said that the only difference between them is when they use soap, they come out white.
It's crazy.
They said that's the only difference between them and
it's crazy.
But
even if you're that poor.
Still
considered,
seen
yes,
higher,
or
better,
believe
whatever.
themselves to be, or
I think there's a line
worth.
where he says that they're lowering the property value.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
He says like that. When are they going to do something to clean up the
to get the black people out of the community because they're lowering the property value,
Right.
and that's such a big part of how you go back historically to how a lot of these classes were established by the people in power, by the wealthy in this country, or whatever. That was part of how racism sort of started to get perpetrated in this country, where they were like, well, listen, you can always believe in the American dream because you're white. At least you're not these people over here. You can always, and that's very specific and very deliberate. And that moment in the court was like, it was so great.
Yeah.
It was so great.
That's when he realized he's like, I've
yes.
fucked up.
Yeah.
And that's where
Yes.
everyone realized, because you had a shift. You had him be like, I shouldn't have said that. I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Like, oh, game over. And then you had every white person in that courthouse just be like, fuck you.
Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah. And the way that the character of Tom Robinson was trying to describe, in a way to not get himself in more trouble,
Right.
what his situation was, where they're like, why did you run if you were innocent? He's like, believe me, I know, but
You
I
guys
didn't.
are the worst.
Yeah, he's
and
like,
no
I
one
didn't.
will- yeah.
Yes, I didn't want to be in a situation that I am currently in right now. Is
Yeah.
basically what he was saying.
Yeah,
Like, I ran
exactly,
because
yeah.
I didn't want to be here, falsely accused for something that I didn't do, like I am currently right now. Again, please, as a black man, this is what I have to deal with.
Right.
But everything, yes sir, no sir, like he's so well mannered.
Yeah, sure.
He was working in the mills when he was 12 when his arm got mangled, so he's now a cripple. So it's like another shit card laid on his life in a way that he's struggling through, but he's doing it with absolute decorum and he's doing it in the best way. He's helping out this girl. She feels lonely. She looks like no one cares about her. And she's like, doesn't have a cent to her name. She's like, oh, I want to pay you for helping me. He's like, no, forget about it. Like, no good deed goes unpunished.
It reminded me of like, while I'm reading this book, I'm on Twitter and somebody posted a clip from the TV show Blackish. I don't know if you guys have seen this clip. It's been going around. But somebody was like, this is the most hilarious thing, where the main character, Anthony Anderson's character, is at work and he opens an elevator and there's just like a little toddler girl in the elevator and she's white. And he like doesn't know what to do. Like, she's by herself. She's unsupervised, just in this elevator. And literally, like, the elevator closes and he just like walks away. And it gets caught on the security cam and he goes into his office. His bosses are like, I can't believe you did this. Like, why would you? And he goes, look, this may seem like I was a monster to you to leave this little girl alone, but you got to understand, as a black man, I can't just go and be like, hi, can I help you, little girl? And like, and then throughout the course of this little scene, they were like, no, you can't just be playing the race card this time. You were an adult man. You should have helped this little girl. And then like his black coworkers come in and are like, sorry, I'm late. There was a little white girl in the elevator. I had to take the stairs. I did not want to fall for that. Like, they all are kind of reinforcing this. And even that main character, he tells his mom and dad or his wife and dad what happened. And his dad, played by Lawrence Fishburne, was like, I'm so proud of you, because that was a situation you could have avoided. And his wife, who's also black, she's like, what are you doing? You're such a monster that you wouldn't help this little girl or whatever. But he was trying to explain like what different things could have happened if he had, like tried to help her, and then maybe like somebody else came across him or whatever. Misinterpreted. And it is exactly like that scene in To Kill a Mockingbird.
Even though I like to think the majority of the world now has got a better understanding about racism and what is acceptable and what is not. But at the same time, like,
I don't know.
You can explain it.
I mean,
I tried.
I hope, but
I really, I'd like to say,
I hope that we're getting
rereading
better.
this now, as you just talked about that scene, like I just think about all this, dash cam videos of black guys getting pulled over, and like, and they're treated completely differently, and it's like we're still there,
I think that's the reason why it's so stagnant, and where it's, they're at such a stalemate. It's the thing where it's like, you know what, you have to give me the benefit of the doubt, and maybe two of you would understand this situation and be completely okay, but I can't guarantee that everyone will. So you literally have to like alter your behavior because one person might not understand or might have a prejudice.
It's true. And I think that's another part that I'm frustrated with this book. Isn't so much the book itself, but it's, again, the sort of impact. Because I'm thinking about the world we live in today. If this was a couple months ago, if Hillary had won, we'd be reading this and we'd be having a laugh. I'd be like, oh, what a quaint, like that's I would be thinking different things. But the fact that the world we live in today, I just keep thinking about this book and the impact of this book, and it's mean to say, but I'm like, this didn't do its job. I'm like, this didn't do anything. Look at where we are today. But that's not up to the book.
And it's literary, and a lot of I mean, one of the biggest issues, right, is education. With some amount of bias, people who are more educated already come to the conclusions
Yes.
in that regard. I think a lot, the more people learn, that's why I worry about like divestment in education.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think that the more we invest in education, like the more people understand the world around them.
Yes.
And the less likely they are to fall prey to kind of this town mentality or
Yes.
the
mob mentality.
Mob mentality,
Yeah.
thank you, mob mentality.
Which is another great breakdown in the book.
Right,
That was
that's what I
great,
mean.
too.
Like, and I think that's what I worry about, right? Because I think that not only, yes, are we saying something, there's something really wrong with the state of our country that people should be getting more out of this book, but we're actually divesting in education, meaning we're investing in the wrong buckets.
And when we realize that racism is learnt and
Right.
not, bred, or, it depends how we, but, the way to undo that is through education.
Right.
And when they're in their prime years and they can make up their mind and see two different sides and be like, you know what, I don't think that my parents are right when they say this because I'm learning something else. But we're completely missing these formative years,
Right.
which could alter the future.
Yeah,
And
I
the
think
divestment,
it's
you're right.
Yeah, I think
We
it's
shoot ourselves in
two
the foot.
kind of critical things that you learn from the facts that you learn. But the things you learn in school and when you have an education, or two of them, there are many, but critical thinking, how to judge whether something is fake news for yourself, how to research something, how to listen to all the facts and make a decision, but also, especially with reading, empathy, learning about other people's perspectives and stories and identifying with them and their plight that may not be your own, and learning that everyone has that I think the perspective of I don't even know what a black man would feel when they come into that wouldn't occur to me, but but once you hear someone's story or you listen to them or you read it or you watch it or anything like that, then you can think about that and you can take yourself out of your own perspective and think, oh my gosh, there are so many other things that other people have to think about. Same thing with men and women, same thing with the LGBTQ community, like everything that your perspective is just one of so many different kinds, and everyone has so many different, that if you listen to them and you read about them, you can actually, I think, broaden your mind so much more. And so I think that's a crucial flaw in not being exposed to other perspectives too.
Yeah.
How many people are reading this book being like, yeah, they voted right, good.
Yeah,
don't
I'm sure
know.
I'm sure a bunch. I'm sure a bunch. I'm sure that when the book first came
Because
out,
they're
that
reading what they want to read.
Yeah.
It's their perspective. It's what they're taking from it. And like you say, you provide the same piece of information with the same evidence, and you go, no, that's wrong.
That's true.
There is an ignorance that will completely always indulge a person, I guess you can say.
Maybe that's where the teachers come in.
Hopefully. I think art does two things. It either entertains or educates, and I think good art does both.
Yes.
But I also believe that art's only requirement is just to be art. We can't judge a piece of art based on how people react to it. We
Like
have,
what you just did 17 seconds ago?
Exactly. We can't do that. And again, I think this is a fantastically written book.
We shouldn't, but we do.
It's so well put together. But when I think about, I think my frustration too is that if something like this were to be covered in school today, I almost feel like this is too tame. Like we got to go even more progressive and more obvious and more in your face and more.
Like 1984.
I mean, even
That's
sure.
not on the nose. That is the nose.
That's a good point. Okay. That's a really good point.
But that's just one of the many issues.
The
that
style
we're
is
facing.
so different, though.
It is.
So different.
This is
super
that
different.
southern
Which one did you
molasses.
enjoy reading?
Great.
Which one do you prefer reading?
I think I am enjoying this much more, and especially the
1984?
yeah.
Did you
The
read that
style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the writing style in this one is
Yes.
less.
I mean,
clipped
there's
and-
humor.
It's not clinical. Yes,
Yeah.
There's
exactly.
humor. I mean, one of the nice things about the perspective we talked about Catcher in the Rye, which is like the opposite. Like you've got a protagonist that it's hard to care for, right? And,
But when you're a teenager and you have I feel like a lot of high schoolers when they read it are like, but then you read it later and you're like,
no, but I mean like the tone, like
Sure.
there's not a lot of her ability to sort of capture the innocence of youth and the mistakes and the perceptions of Scout and how she sees the world, I think help a lot in sort of taming.
And navigating these issues.
Navigating the issues.
Big time.
And I could tell, we talked about Go Set a Watchman earlier, which is like the earlier draft of it, and you could tell that if you read Go Set a Watchman, it's a lot more biting.
Yeah.
It's a lot more biting, and it's a
Really?
lot lot less accessible as a result.
Interesting.
It does all the things you just talked about, but as a result, it feels
it's
a lot less accessible
sure.
because you lose the innocence. And I think the innocence is what puts a lot of things into context.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really does. And like I said, it helps to navigate some of these really difficult and uncomfortable issues because it's through the lens of a little girl who she's figuring it out.
Nothing says innocence.
Figuring it out, yeah.
A little girl just trying to figure out who the hell she is.
That's right.
And it's framed around justice. It's framed around an actual case.
The notion of justice.
Yes, the notion of justice.
Yeah.
That
The place of
old-fashioned
justice.
notion.
Yes. Where, it feels like she's learning a lot about right and wrong and kind of the complex nature of people, and that people can be more than one thing at once, whereas the law doesn't leave a lot of room for that, unfortunately.
I really like the part where she was with Jem and Dill and they're observing the court proceedings as they're happening. And I think it was Dill that was getting really upset.
Yes. Yep.
When Tom Robinson was getting like cross-examined.
Right.
And he was getting really upset and
he's an out-of-towner.
Yeah. And Scout was like, "What's going on? What's going on?" He was like, the way that he was talking to him, and then Scout was kind of trying to defend
That's just the way it is.
That's just the way he is. That's just his way. That's just the way he is. But I think that exchange was really important because Scout is, when you're a little kid, you also can't read people yet. You don't know what that is. That sort of nonverbal communication that's happening that human beings are always sending out, all those pheromones and stuff, and like so she's like figuring all that stuff out, which I thought was really interesting.
Having said that, though, she did when the mob came for her dad.
She knew something was up,
right? She did read.
Yeah.
She read it better than anybody else, right?
Absolutely.
I always feel like I think that the way that was written, and it's actually one of my favorite scenes in the last few chapters that we read, where she knew that her father was acting strange, and she had to kind of just make sure that there was an air of safety. And she goes, and you can see her breaking it down. Father said that if you ever want to have a conversation, you got to talk about what you know. So let's talk about what we know.
Yeah.
And it just so happened she tried one and it got shut down.
Right.
So she's like, the only other thing I know is this one thing that ended up being the exact proper thing to say, which reminded this Cunningham that Atticus was on his side and that they'd been working together on a separate issue and that he actually isn't a bad guy. But what I loved about it is that when it was all settled and went home, she thought about it and it hit her and she bawled her eyes out. And I think that it actually says is that when I finally understood
what had happened, that she's just cried.
So again, as being a dad of a little girl, like now, I watch my daughter do this on a daily basis.
That's
like
crazy.
she'll come home from school and she'll digest the world and all the things that happened to her.
Yeah.
And like it's like that's when she's like, oh well, this and this and this happened and that wasn't right and this was right and like why did they do this and like it's amazing how that perspective changes as you read this book throughout different phases of life. It's really, that's the thing that really got me. I'm like, I like all of a sudden like Atticus is like more of a hero than ever because of the kind of dad he is.
Sure.
And I remember Java, a book Geek Girl, way earlier in the chat was saying, I remember being young and every time I read this I'm reminded that I just wanted my family to be more like Atticus.
Right.
Wouldn't that be great, having someone that's not going to discipline the hell out of you for putting a toe out of line?
Well, her dad never mansplains anything.
No.
Right? Like, it's like her
That's
dad
true.
never mansplains anything.
That's true.
He's always like,
Unless she asks, what is this
no,
thing?
I mean, he
And he'll be like,
explains, but he doesn't mansplain. He's like, he doesn't say actually. Like,
yeah, that's true.
So, which is funny because like even back then, like there's the expectation that men will tell you, what, and I love that he didn't.
Well, I think that is it. That's the foundation of that is respect, and it's like Atticus will talk to her as an equal and with respect.
Right.
Like he respects her inquisitive nature.
Right.
He respects her thirst to learn. He respects that she's not like all the other little ladies in town. And I think mansplaining comes about when there is a lot. Like an expectation that's unfair, and when it's there's a lack of respect.
Have you guys gotten to the part with the uncle?
No.
Yet? Okay, 'cause that's like a very good contrast, the uncle versus Atticus.
Actually, I think we did.
Yeah.
The uncle's been around.
Because
they went and spent
he's
a
a big
Christmas.
mansplainer. He's like, he
They
goes
went and
to
spent a
scout
Christmas,
and then like Atticus steps in and says, don't, don't go there. Like it's.
This was when she kicked the cousin?
Yes. Who was talking bad about Atticus, I think. Yeah, that's right.
right.
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And then
We
they
didn't get
both
to that.
kind
Was that
of
last?
came
That was
to
the last?
realization. Yeah.
We didn't talk about that.
No, we didn't. But I mean, the aunt. When the aunt comes to live with them, I think that
she's a
Atticus
nightmare.
is such a good dad, but he's got this insecurity of like, well, there has been no female presence in raising my kids, and he still is probably insecure about like, well, is Scout getting what she
I feel
needs
like
because
he's
there's
copying
no.
it from everyone,
Yeah.
everywhere. I
Yeah.
think he's hearing it from the neighborhood.
I'm sure
who
he
are
is.
nosy about her behavior and running around with Jem. He's hearing it from his family. He's
So
hearing
he's
it
like,
from
okay,
all the men and women.
I'm gonna ask my sister. It's not like she loves her husband. She doesn't. I'm just gonna ask her to come and live with us, and provide that, I guess, that female presence, which, you know, yeah, I don't know. Atticus, I think, feels like he needs that, but he really doesn't. He's been doing a fine job.
Yeah.
I would love Atticus as a dad, but just with a little bit more loving and a little bit more play. But basically, Atticus as a dad.
He's a little unreadable sometimes,
Yeah.
where he makes it. You know, I think I love that he doesn't talk down to her, because when you're a kid, any kind of kid, but especially a curious and weird one, like having someone not speak down to you, I think is so important. But also there's this this disconnect of, you know, what does that mean? Am I doing something wrong that's normal for kids? But because he's so good and he's so strong and he's a little stoic, that you can kind of lose that. And so there's this.
Yeah.
Maybe he's worried. Maybe he knows himself well enough. Because I was trying to figure. I was like, why is he doing this? Because he seems more evolved than that.
Yeah.
I guess. But I think also if you are older and he seems like he's pretty self-aware, maybe he realizes that he's not as potentially nurturing as a mother traditionally.
Right. I also
is.
think that I could never picture Atticus like, because he thinks his kids are like adults, which is cool. He treats them that way.
Yeah.
He sort of talks to them that way, but he also thinks his kids are adults and doesn't realize that they're kids. So I could never picture him like sitting down and like building Legos with Scout. Like, you know,
I think they made
he
that
would just be
very
like,
clear when he's in his late 40s.
Exactly,
And he's got 2
exactly.
kids sort of
He's
under-
past
under
all that.
13.
yeah. He says something like he
I'm too
can't,
old
too old to jump around or whatever it was,
Yeah.
like that Scout and Jem were like, well, come do
He has this
this.
quiet time after dinner with
Yep.
him in the paper, and so they've got to figure themselves out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I find myself yearning for that sometimes.
Yeah.
The
Quiet
kids
time
are all
on
like
the
crazy. I'm
paper.
just like, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
No, I mean it is interesting for sure. I mean you kind of watch that also when as Jem grows up and becomes more like Atticus.
Yeah. He's starting to get more
like,
mature and more,
you know,
less
He's
playful.
being used because it is a first-person book. I mean, I'm breaking down the writing here. The more that Jem matures, the more that he becomes the scope of actually what's happening in the book. Because when you've got your protagonist, Scout, figuring it all out,
Right.
she can't explain to the reader what's happening because
Right.
she herself
Jem
is
becomes
learning.
the voice of reason. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Jem is in there
Yeah.
going, you know, and as soon as there's a moment like in the courthouse where I'm like, hold on, everyone's like behaving like they know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. So Jem's like, by the way, this is what's happening. That's awesome. You know.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. It's a very good observation.
Yeah.
I really like the character of Calpurnia. I think that she's a fantastic
fantastic.
character,
Yeah.
and has provided a lot of great.
She's the mother figure.
She's the
right?
mother
I mean,
figure.
Yeah.
She's way more than
isn't
the
she?
aunt.
Yeah.
You know?
So I haven't watched the movie yet, and I'm trying to figure out who Atticus is.
Oh,
in
you're
my head.
casting
I
her?
can describe him,
Okay.
but I can't. Oh, he's the dad in 13 Reasons Why. That's who I'm seeing. That's
great.
exactly what. That's Atticus for me at the moment. But Calpurnia is. Have you seen True Blood?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tara's mum.
Oh.
Tara's mum is
Okay.
Calpurnia,
Okay.
like perfectly the way
Really?
they talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I'm seeing her at the moment.
Okay. All right.
And when we get to more, I mean, Jem is almost faceless at this stage. Scout, I have no idea, but I saw a glimpse of the clip in the movie, and I'm like, nah.
Oh my gosh, the kid actors in the film are some of the best kid actors you'll ever see in the movie.
Really?
That was another reason the movie was so good, was because when that film came out, which I think was like 1960.
It's black and
And
white.
it's still
I'm
black
one of
and
those
white.
assholes
Yeah.
that still balks at black and white.
The kid,
There's so many good
those
black
kid
and
actors are gold standard kid actors. That like you're like, okay, this is Spielberg
There
was
they
going
are.
for this.
Yeah.
Ooh.
In
That's Scout.
maybe.
Oh, that looks like an ad.
Was it?
Is this an ad for it?
To Kill a Mockingbird,
Yeah.
starring
Oh, that's
Gregory
a trailer.
Peck, with Mary Badham as Scout.
Philip
love-
Alford
yeah.
as Jem, based on a novel by Harper
Oh,
Lee.
that's a very good shot.
Says the press. It gets closer to the heart than any recent movie. One of the year's 10 best Associated Press. Yeah,
so
that's
long.
that's not what
I
the
mean, she
movie's
did
like.
look like she was tired and wanted to sleep.
What's that
just
accent? It's like a
then.
transatlantic accent. That you're
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah. Should I win?
Bully for you.
Heartwarming and poignantly real. Sorry, it just like zooms out at you.
No, it's like.
This just in, world
Yeah.
news. Yeah.
Yeah, I know
the
I've
time.
seen.
Oh, they would not have shot that today.
With a kid, yeah.
That's a whole host of.
Would have been a
Really
CG.
time, wasn't it?
CG child.
I'm panicking
Yep.
and I'm not even a parent.
You know, there's a bunch of child labor laws. Yeah, To Kill a Mockingbird. But I'm gonna watch it after I finish the book again because I can't remember if I know I've seen the movie. I think I watched it with my dad, who's a lawyer. But
Your dad is Atticus?
Yeah. No? Okay.
he's a good dude, but he's not Atticus.
He's a good dude. He's just no bro, you know?
No, he's not. Yeah, but I'm from California. But I watched the film with him, but I can't remember if I actually read the book or if I read
Cliff
the
Notes.
did like a Sparks Notes situation. So it's been fun to read it again, and it's interesting because I feel like courtroom scenes in novels can be so dull.
Oh, and it was like riveting. Yeah.
But this,
definitely.
I think the writing in this and sort of really focusing on the dialogue and having her brother kind of explain it to her, but really the dialogue and getting to hear how people speak and the perspective behind that and everything that they're not saying. The way, like, you can hear the tone of voice in it, which I feel like is the quality of like the dialogue, which some writers I feel like are great with the descriptive language and then the dialogue is fine, but the dialogue in this to me feels like real people. It feels like people being cagey and people being sneaky and Tom trying to figure out how to put it into words.
I know, without offending anybody.
This like game that he's playing, that's his life on the line.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, really powerful.
Yeah. Are you guys listening to the film soundtrack while reading? Because I am, and it's the best. It's the best. It's such a good.
I keep meaning to every time.
So good. I sent you a link. It's on YouTube.
I know.
And I'm juggling
Fantastic.
the book. That's me. And then I've
great.
got today, see, when I walk into the gym, which is where I like to read my book, with this bad boy, it is a magnet for everyone over 70 that, you know, cycles at 0.4 miles an hour who wants to have a good old chat with me about this.
They're doing more than I am, so more power to them.
And this woman, was going on and on about sort of like all the influence of different books and movies of the nature that follow these particular themes.
Yeah.
And she said, you know, it's the kind of book you only ever want to read once, but you should read it.
And it'll stay with you. And it'll stay with you,
You learn
Hopefully.
a lot.
Absolutely.
If you're looking to learn.
People in the chat were throwing a lot of recommendations like that as well, Maude, but like books that had like similar
Code,
subject matter.
Apparently.
Which one?
The Contra Code. I'm just kidding.
Oh, cool. Yeah, the Contra Code. Yeah. No, that unlocked a new voice, is what they said of mine. Thank you very much. That's great.
Is that AB?
Yep.
Yeah.
Left, right, left, right.
Yeah. Left, right, AB stuff.
That's actually in
Is it
Punch
really?
Escrow, yeah.
What? Hey.
It's like a little
plug.
Is it like a? Well, not, I kind of
I don't want to give it
know.
away,
Yeah.
but there's a
Okay, great. There's like a reference to that.
there's a bunch of like there's a bunch of throwbacks to stuff like that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Well, we said that
awesome.
we've liked this second section of the book.
Yeah.
Because we finally got to what the hell it's all about. I feel like
in
the
a
first
way.
half of the book is, and it's unfair to even call it world building, because that's not entirely what she's trying to do.
But it's setting up the town
Place
and
setting, in a way.
place setting, character building, sure.
You know, and I found myself this time asking, why do we have a character like Dill? What's his purpose?
Did you guys talk about how he's based on Truman Capote last time?
Oh no.
Yeah, so she was childhood friends with
Truman, yeah.
Truman
She was like his
Capote.
secretary when he was doing the I forget now what book that was. When he was the guys who were wrongfully
I can't. No, that's fine.
whatever, the guys who
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's so
so
funny.
Dill is based on Truman Capote, which I find really
Okay,
funny.
well,
So whenever I
that's
read the Dill
interesting.
parts, I'm like, oh, that's cute. It's baby Truman Capote.
Is that why they're getting married and they love her?
It's
Remember,
baby
she's
Truman
claiming.
Capote.
Yeah, I love that. But I also asked like why we have characters like Miss Maude and Miss Stephanie, and you know, you learn so much about this neighborhood, and we still don't really understand. Like, Boo Radley's taken a backseat even more
In this second section,
now.
yeah, for sure.
But I kind of go, we just spent half a bloody book finding out about the burnt house and the flowers in the yard and, you know, this old lady who passed away and had to read to them every fucking, why that much? That is a lot. And now we're getting like so much that I'm savoring every single page because it's all happening now.
Right.
Well,
I just feel like
we'll get to we have the
Long time to make a
third
bed.
section to finish, which I think brings everything full circle. And you guys, we are going to be, and we'll get more into Comic-Con, but we won't be here next week, but we'll be wrapping up the book the week after before we go on to the next one. Yeah, you have a week off, so catch up if anyone's watching this on VOD later, you have time to catch up.
And I'm excited about our picks for next month's book in the book club because I think we're just going to, not so much a downer, we're going to go full fantasy. Is that
full
what we're doing?
Fantasy.
Like we're doing
we'll have
escapism
You guys
fantasy?
have denied me of my fantasy.
That's why I sent a bunch too. I was like, let's just see if we were all.
I like wrote this list back, and I was like, guys, I'm not giving you options. It's fantasy.
Yeah.
No, super on board. So we'll have those on our next show. But before we dive into that, let's get into some sci-fi and talk about Punch Escrow.
Tal, thank you so much for hanging out and having like rereading To Kill a Mockingbird from high school.
It was funny.
Hang out
So
with us.
when they contacted me, you'll be at an alpha book club. I'm like, okay, cool, because when I was watching it, you guys were doing Princess Bride. I was like, oh, awesome. I was like, what? Like,
I'll read Princess Bride. Sorry, man.
And I'd seen Carrie Elway's in Michigan right before he came on. Like I went to see he does his because the thing that he did here he does like on stage, right? Like which is like awesome. And I learned from hearing you guys like that he apparently did not even watch the movie when he's backstage, so I don't know what he's doing. But it was just so cool, and I was like, oh great, I wonder what they're doing next. To Kill a Mockingbird.
Blame Hector.
I'm so sorry.
Wait, we were like, didn't we learn about school books of 1984?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, I recommended 1984.
Yeah.
We all had to read
I
that
promise I will never pick a school book.
But with sci-fi, I want to know if you were to suggest 3 sci-fi books that shaped you for a future book club, what would those 3 books be?
Oof. Okay. The one that I would recommend the most is probably the book that really influenced me to write this, which is Off to Be the Wizard. And it's
I've heard about these. Very, very good things.
Phenomenal. It's a series of books. The first one's called Off to Be the Wizard. It's about a guy who inadvertently stumbles into a file that contains the source code of the universe. And so by changing some data in the file, he can make himself fly, he can make himself rich or whatever. And so he decides to turn himself into a wizard and send himself back to, the 1600s or whatever.
Wow.
And when he gets back there, he finds out that there are other people who found this file, and they're all kind of hackers, and so like this whole hacker, like wizarding is true, but it's just a bunch of hackers from art, from the 20th century who went back in time because they discovered this file.
That's great.
And then, there's a whole bunch of hijinks. So, and the reason I like it is because the voice. One of the things I really like about modern sci-fi, like books like The Martian and Ready Player One, Off to Be the Wizard, is that it feels like sci-fi has become more accessible than literary, and I like books that just feel like I'm speaking to somebody or they're speaking to me. And The Martian is like a great example. You're just like there with Mark Watney. He's talking to you. He's telling you at bar. He's telling you a story. And that kind of style of writing is very appealing to me. That's what made me feel comfortable to write because I like to read literary books, but I don't consider myself like a literary person. And so being snarky and a smart ass and all that kind of stuff, being given like a poetic license to go do that for a novel felt really, really empowering. So
cool.
That's the first one. Another one is Ringworld.
I'm writing this all down. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Larry and
I've heard about that one.
Valerian are good
Larry
names
and
too.
So he's like the godfather of hard sci-fi.
Ringworld. Thank you.
Ringworld. He's like the godfather of hard
That's
sci-fi.
That's been on my list for a long time.
He's written a ton of books, and he's even done some fantasy. He did a series of books, an anthology called The Magic Goes Away, where magic is based on mana, and mana is like a natural resource that runs out.
Oh no.
I've been calling it mana this whole time.
Mana, whatever. Yeah,
is it
sorry.
my accent? It's probably
No,
mine.
I'm terrible at pronouncing things.
Wait, what's that Super Nintendo game? Legend of Mana? I think it's mana. You gotta tap your mana.
No.
Yeah, it's mana. Sorry.
Tap your mana.
No,
mana
mana
from the heavens.
Have
right?
good mana. So
That's a different word. It's a different. There's an extra N in there.
So anyway, and then
Ringworld,
probably the last one, if people haven't read it, is a book called Lexicon.
Cool.
Which is really cool. It's a book where basically they figure out that your patterns of speech can actually control the way people think, and so like these people. So it's like
It's
all
true.
about
Syntax, basically?
Yeah.
man,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is cool.
And
It's
so
true
like,
with
there's
Maude.
like this government agency.
Her accent causes people to think differently about the world.
true.
Yeah.
It's mana.
And we all want all of a sudden we all want Fosters and ribs.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
we
right.
didn't drink Bloody Foster.
True, yeah.
But it's funny that you do say that because every time I had a conference call today with this lovely girl, but I can visually see patterns in people's dialect.
Yeah.
And so what happens in America when they talk and they're explaining things and it sounds like this the whole time?
Don't
and
judge vocal
over
fry,
and
we
over
can't
and
help
over
it.
and over.
Color of Magic is
again.
very good too. Sorry, there's somebody said.
Oh, people are
yeah.
going through. Oh yeah, I love
Yeah.
Garth Nix. I
Yeah.
haven't read that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, oh that's awesome. So
The Abhorsen series,
getting
cool.
into the like hard science
Thank you,
fiction.
Miss
Yeah.
What drew you to that specific type?
Because I it's funny because I'm terrible at science.
Clearly not.
Well, no,
Clearly
like, I never imagined if I wrote a book, it would be a hard science fiction book. And the way this whole thing started is, back when they were rebooting Star Trek, J.J. Abrams, I was like having a chat with someone about
Lens flare, yeah.
about lens flare. Yeah,
Really?
literally.
Wow.
Wow. See, we just had a thing, right? So. No, I had a conversation with someone about lens flare, and all of a sudden, like the CEO of my company just interjects in this conversation. He goes, "It's bullshit! It's all bullshit!" And he's like this Indian PhD in in electrical engineering, and he's like starts to say like nobody ever like Star Trek is all bullshit because nobody would ever step foot in a transporter because if they knew how it worked, they would never step into it. And so I had this idea. I was like, why don't we create an origin story for
the
the
transporter.
commercialization of teleportation?
I love it. I love it.
You're like, how did people ever accept like the teleportation as a means of transportation?
Except
right?
the difference between you and everyone else on this planet is that we'd think that and be like, hey, we should do that. Oy. All right,
I'm like,
I'm going to actually do it.
That's
2
amazing.
years plus all the
the research was like, so I started researching and I'm like, oh my God, there's so much about this. It's like, it's crazy. So,
Can I ask you a question,
yeah.
Tal? And if it's vital to the plot, feel free to not tell me because
Yeah.
I am about to read this thing.
Sure.
But in this world, does Star Trek exist? Does science
Yes.
fiction notions of teleportation exist? I feel like that's a big.
It's hard. The book is
Yeah.
hard. It's hard sci-fi, meaning everything that has
It's our
happened in the
world.
world up until this point. It's near
It's
future,
happened.
so it's like
Cool.
It's driven also by like there's a big movement in near future. Like Black Mirror is a good example, and like I think in general we like to feel like the future is grounded because we're so uncertain of the present.
Yeah.
Like it used to be like the Hunger Games and whatever Divergent. It used to be like, oh, the present is so comfortable. Let's just imagine a terribly dystopian future where we overcome
Yeah.
whatever. But like
Mad
now it's
Max,
like, oh my
No,
God,
we need
like,
to see the light
we need
again.
something to look forward to.
Science save us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's a good shirt.
Science save us.
That's two
Yeah.
shirts now. We
I
got a
know.
business
Saying, like,
now.
Yeah.
Here we
Yeah,
go.
exactly. Punderwear, exactly. That's right.
So that's the hard science fiction. The idea of it is like I really wanted people to, when I started to solve these problems, I didn't want it to just be with, whiz bang stuff.
Technology that doesn't yet exist. But
Someone
yeah.
just said DeMarco draws in the comments. Did you see Jeff Goldblum vomit? What?
No, I did not.
Did it go backwards?
And
Star
lots of
Trek
numbers
is not
says-
real. The
yeah.
series
Is
of Star
it
Trek
like
is
a
real.
gift
Yeah,
of
yeah,
him
yeah.
vomiting or something? Like,
Thank God, Star Trek
It's real
as a TV show is real in
As
the
a
book.
TV show,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a serious concept. So I want to ask you because
Yes.
we've been doing this book club forever now, which is
even a year.
yeah, but it feels
Forever.
like a lot. When it was pitched, I was like super excited, but thought no one's gonna because I just felt like there's not a lot of book stuff out there. But one of the things that we had been doing before this that I was really excited about is the Inkshares contest,
Yes.
which we've done with Nerdist and Geek and Sundry,
So
and
cool.
they brought it to us a year or two ago. And basically, for everyone who doesn't know, you submit, and you can explain the real life process better.
Right.
But basically, you submit a pitch and longer, chapters and things like that, and you campaign for people to pre-order
Yes.
an individual copy of your book. So you have this built-in audience. The publisher knows, Inkshares knows that there are people who are already interested in this
Yeah.
book because you get into it right away, which
Cool.
I think is really cool.
Yeah.
And we got to read all of these awesome submissions, and we've done space opera, we've done hard
Yep.
science, we've done
Fantasy.
yeah,
Yeah.
so there's been really great stuff. So I just want to know what your experience with that has been like and what you would recommend because we've been doing them for a while now.
So I actually had a publishing deal with like a publisher, and I opted to tear that up and go. One of the issues I always had
That's
is
crazy, Tal. You walked away from that.
well because one of the issues I had is I'm a Geek and Sundry fan. I read it's like there's like hops on my web every day like Geek and Sundry, Nerdist, Onion. There's like specific places I stop before I do anything productive. So I think that for me, one of the things I saw in my publishing deals is that it was very, my original publishing deals was very focused on traditional like retail and magazines, and I'm like, what are we going to do to get this on Signal Boost?
Yes.
Like, what are you guys going to do about that?
Digitally,
and like,
yeah.
And I said, like, my audience is like the people I'm writing this book for are, watching Because Science. They're watching Signal Boost. They're critters. They're these are my people. That's who I wrote the book for. So when the contest came up, to be able to write under the Geek and Sundry umbrella and to be part of this family and to me, that was this was the only way to really truly communicate with the people I wanted to write the book for. So
I love it.
I don't know if that's everybody's story, but for me, that's, being associated with this brand makes me emotional. Like it's really.
I'm getting emotional. That's so awesome.
That's great,
really,
Tal.
really great.
That's awesome.
How, besides sort of going after the market, how has that kind of publishing process gone? How is that, do you think, different from traditional kind of publishing?
Well, in a lot of ways. So number one is it's very data driven. So I think what you get in the publishing world is a lot of people who make decisions, and I, in general, I think that it's tough when you've got a whole bunch of people who act as as gatekeepers. Yeah. Because there's a lot of nepotism and all that kind of stuff, and as a first-time author, you run into a lot of that. And also, they treat you poorly. Like you're at the bottom of the totem pole, especially as a first-time author, and you send query letters to agents and they reject you and you feel like crap and like you have no idea why they rejected you. There's no data behind it. And so I think that what's cool about Inkshares is the data. It's not only the data driven by the crowdfunding, but the properties interest. Like for example, you guys are Legendary Digital, right? Sure. And part of the deal was, in my case, was the first look deal with Legendary. So I had people, like creative director Alex Hedlund at Legendary gave me notes on my book.
Wow. Yeah, that's
like,
awesome.
where are you going to get that?
Yeah. That's awesome.
Howie Sanders at UTA gave me notes on my book. Greg Silverman, the head of Warner Brothers, gave me notes on my book.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like, so cool. Where are you going to get that? Usually in the traditional model, even if you get a publishing deal, you're assigned a developmental editor. That's one person.
Oh, and they don't really do much, do they?
I don't know. My developmental editor beat the crap out of you, but like.
Physically, do we have to call someone?
He did. It's unfortunate.
Wow.
There's a loss. I can't discuss it because it's
okay.
It's
Sure.
Also, I say data.
That's also very incorrect. It's
See?
data. It's data. Just watch Star Trek. It's data.
Watch Star Trek. It's
data.
data.
That'll answer it.
No.
Data.
No, they're both correct.
Data is a philosophy where.
Data. Data's like crazy art for the sake of crazy.
There's a picture of.
That's Dada.
Isn't there like if you take your toilet and you put it in the living room?
Yeah, that's Dada.
That's Dada.
It was a group of villains that fought the Doom Patrol in the 80s. That's Dada. But Data is Star Trek.
Data.
He's the android.
So since it's on everyone's minds and we're about to go, we teased it earlier, we're all going to be at Comic-Con. What are your plans at Comic-Con? Where can everyone find you?
I'm going to be at Carnival, which I'm still working on.
Carnival.
Pretend like you're Maude.
And so I'll be there. We'll be putting out hours, but I think it's at the Marriott, and there's lots of data. Data. Yeah. There's lots of data online. Yeah. And then I have a Comic-Con panel Friday at 9 p.m.
Cool.
Where we'll talk about it's called The Future Is Now, which is also my column on Geek and Sundry, where we're going to actually sit down with real scientists and talk about the intersection of science fiction and reality and how close we are to it today. Like things like teleportation and genetic engineering and nanotechnology.
How many situations do you think someone wrote about it in a fictional concept? And then a scientist is like, oh God, we should probably do that now.
I mean, that's all Star Trek. We have a Star Trek communicator in our pocket right now. So many things based off of that came from that imagination.
One last thing that I want to do before we sign off, both Bradley and Plaguewind in the chat, they've started a book. They haven't finished it. How do you kick them up the butt?
You have to want it. I mean, it's really just about passion. It's not about. It's never about starting. It's always about finishing. That's everything in life. Is we start a million things all the time. I think you need to visualize yourself in this chair. Yeah. A year from now.
Ooh, that's good motivation, Tal.
That's a good
Bradley,
one.
Really
for
good.
Wife. Your wife is asking you to write more, and Plaguewind, you're up to chapter 4 of your book. That is 4 more than most people.
That's so cool.
You guys can do it.
Keep on keeping on.
That's so
then
cool.
we can read them
We can
much
read
like
your
the Punch
books.
Escrow. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
I love being here.
Tal, you're the best,
Yes.
Tal.
And thanks
So
for reading
cool.
this for the
So
sake
cool.
of
Yeah,
conversation.
seriously.
Congrats on everything, Tal. Yeah, thank you, man.
Thank you very much.
Don't forget, the Punch Escrow is available on July 25th. We're all going to read it. Thanks for joining us. Where can people find you on social media?
I'm on Twitter. Twitter's probably the easiest way. Virtual Tal on Twitter. The Punch Escrow is on both on Twitter as Punch Escrow at Punch Escrow or Facebook at www.facebook.com/thepunchescrow. Very easy to find, and you can pre-order it ideally at your indie bookstores.
Yes.
People, indie bookstores,
Yes.
Nice.
or if you're lazy, go to Amazon.
Awesome. So our homework this week is to finish the book. You have 2 weeks because, reminder, we won't have a show next week. We're going to be at San Diego Comic-Con, but we will be back on July 26th. Real quick, where can we find everyone else at Comic-Con?
Follow me on Twitter. I have two panels, I think, as of right now. I'm doing a panel for DC All Access Thursday morning, and then I'm doing a Geek and Sundry panel Friday afternoon. So follow me on Twitter, and I will be tweeting that stuff out.
And I actually haven't told anyone this, so this
Exclusive.
is the first public announcement.
Wait, oh. Hector, bring out the voice.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, world premiere. Maude Garrett's got some news. Everybody, listen up. Perk your ears up, because here it comes.
I will be presenting for Sci-Fi all of Comic-Con, and it's going to be broadcast on the network channel on cable Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, I think from 8 o'clock p.m. PT. And Zach Levi is going to be hosting that one. I'm one of the two field reporters. And then on Sunday, if you're there, I've got an official signing at midday. You can get all the details on my Twitter and Instagram too. So
That's awesome.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The
Yeah.
Sci-Fi
Yeah.
channel, Maude Garrett, 8 p.m. Thursday night. Check it out. Zach Levi. Ha-ha. There it is. That's
and
so cool.
Nerdist has a bunch of panels, so check those out on the Nerdist Twitter. I'm going to be on the Nerdist panel in Hall H, which is
I
terrifying.
saw
Whoa,
that.
what day?
On Thursday.
That's
Felicia
nuts.
and Kyle.
Yeah, it's going to be super
awesome.
fun. And then I'm on a panel hosted by
Alicia
Alicia Malone
Malone.
about the
Oh,
ladies of
that's so
film
cool.
Twitter. That's
I'm
gonna
gonna
be
go to
really
that.
cool.
I'm gonna go to
Lots
that.
of really, really
I'll be
awesome
be
women
there.
on the internet.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So come find us if you can. If you're not going to be there, don't worry. You can join us next week. You can talk to us on Twitter. Don't forget we're on
Goodreads.
Goodreads.
Gotcha.
If you have book recommendations, we have some ideas, but you can always send us more. We're reading new ones every month. We want fantasy next month. We've decided as a group, so send us your recommendations at Nerdist, at Geek and Sundry, at Join Team Alpha with the hashtag Alpha Book Club. Bye,
Goodbye.
guys.
We did